All right, hi guys. Good afternoon. Welcome to another live video with Airline Powers. Um, so I'm just going live, and then it will be published on my channel, so a person can always go back to it and review what I spoke about. So in this video, we're just going to speak on climate change. We're going to talk about the impact of climate change and why it matters. So I'm just going to get started because, as I said before, it will be published so persons will be able to view it once it is up. So first, let's just get an overview of what climate change is, and this is something that I'm really passionate about. Um, I am very interested in climate change, sustainability, finding methods to mitigate the effects of climate change, um, sustainable energy. Like, that is what I really focus on. So I really get excited when speaking about climate change. Now, the thing about climate change is not everyone believes that it is real, and that is with everything, most things. There's always some contrasting opinion on a mere fact, and that is totally fine. And before, it was climate change isn't happening. Now it is, climate change is happening, but the reasons that facts say are causing climate change are not the actual reason. So there's always something. But the truth is, climate change is happening. Climate change is real, and that can just be seen by observing climate patterns and weather patterns over years. Now, statistically speaking, global average temperatures have increased from 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit from 1901 to 2016, right? So we see a 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperatures. Changes of 1 or 2 degrees in the average temperature of the planet can cause potentially dangerous shifts in climate and weather just by 1 or 2 degrees, there can be a shift in the climate and weather of the whole planet. Now, these real observable changes are what we call climate change impacts, because there are visible ways that climate change is affecting the earth. So we are seeing with our eyes over the years how this climate change is affecting our way of life, how we live, our environment. So, like for example, many places have experienced changes in rainfall, which has resulted in more floods. You also have more droughts because there's less rainfall, intense rain, as well as more frequent and severe heat waves. So we see how temperature changes are visible, weather changes are visible, like rainfall. These are things that we're observing. All right, so the planet's oceans and glaciers have also experienced changes. So oceans are warming. One second, please. Oceans are warming and becoming more acidic. Ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising, and these are stuff that we're going to speak on. So as I said before, we're going to talk about the impacts and why the impacts matters, right? So climate change impacts our health, the environment, and our economy. So we see those three things that we're touching on: our health, that means our personal well-being, ourselves; our environment that we live in, that we're surrounded by; and our economy that affects our day-to-day activities, our financial activities, our social activities. So we see how climate change not just affects, oh, it's just the environment. No, it's about you, and it's also about your community as well. So the first one that we're going to speak on as an impact of climate change is warmer temperatures increase the frequency, intensity, and duration of heat waves. Of course, if it's warmer, you're going to have more frequent heat waves, more intensified heat waves, and it's going to be for a longer period of time, which poses health risks, particularly for young children and the elderly. Now, the keyword here is health risks, and this is what we're going to speak about. So, why does it matter? Why does health risks matter? Well, changing the climate can result in multiple threats to human health and welfare. Warmer average temperatures would likely lead to hotter days and more frequent and longer heat waves, which I mentioned before, which could increase the number of health related illnesses and deaths. So, not only are we having more intensified, longer, frequent heat waves, now because they're longer, because they're intensified, it's affecting individuals, but with heat related illnesses. right? So increases in the frequency or severity of extreme weather events, such as storms, could increase the risk of dangerous flooding, high winds, and other direct threats to people and property. Health risks, right? People. Warmer temperatures could also reduce air quality by increasing the chemical reactions that produce smog, along with changes in precipitation patterns and extreme events, which could enhance the spread of some diseases. So we see how certain things can enhance the spread of diseases. Heat related illnesses. We also have ear related illnesses, which can affect your lungs. So we see the potential health risks. Now, in addition, climate change could require adaptation on larger and faster scales than in the past, presenting challenges to human well-being and the economy. The more extensively and more rapidly the climate changes, the larger the potential effects on society. The extent to which climate change will affect different regions and sectors of society, um, it will not only depend on the sensitivity of those systems to climate change, but also their ability to adapt and cope with climate change. So, how are you able to adapt? How are you able to cope? Some areas can cope more than others, some can't. More effects there. Populations of particular concern include the poor, the elderly, the already in poor health, the disabled, and the indigenous populations. If you're already in poor health and you're um, exposed to all of these effects, you're in a worse position, right? Um, if you're poor, you don't have access to health facilities, health care that also puts you at risk. The elderly, the disabled, where it's not as easy to access health care, you're also at risk. So you have heat related deaths, you have heat related illnesses, cold, when it's too cold related deaths. That's a real thing. Heating and cooling degree days. And let's speak on heating and cooling degrees. So heating and cooling degree days measure the difference between outdoor temperatures and the temperatures that people feel comfortable indoors, right? We're going to use US as an example. So as the US climate has warmed in recent years, heating degree days have decreased and cooling degree days have increased overall, suggesting that Americans need to use less energy for heating and more energy for air conditioning. This pattern stands out most in the North and West United States, while much of the Southeast has experienced the opposite results. So either it's cold outside, you spend more money on heating, or it's very warm and you spend more money or more energy on air conditioning. So you see the difference in temperatures. You also have Lyme disease, and Lyme disease is a bacterial illness spread by ticks that bite humans. Lyme habitats, I'm sorry, not Lyme habitats, tick habitats and populations are influenced by many factors, which includes climate, right? So nationwide, the rapid reported cases of Lyme disease has nearly doubled since 1991. The number and distribution of reported cases of Lyme disease have increased over time. So now before it was 50, now it's like 110 more cases of Lyme disease per 100,000 people, right, who are dying. You also have more disease, West Nile virus, um, ragweed pollen season. All of these are influenced by climate change, and you would probably never even think about it. And that's just the truth, you know. So moving away from health risks, there's also another impact. So climate change can impact human health by worsening air and water quality, increasing the spread of certain diseases, and altering the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, which we spoke about in the first point. Um, However, let's focus on like extreme weather events. I think that's a key point that we want to highlight. Why does it matter? Well, long-term changes in climate can directly or indirectly affect many aspects of society in potentially disruptive ways. For example, warmer average temperatures could increase air conditioning costs and affect the spread of diseases, as we mentioned before, like Lyme disease, but could also improve conditions for growing some crops. So we see warm conditions can affect you, can also benefit you, you can grow some crops, right? More extreme variations in weather are also a threat to society. More frequent and intense extreme heat events can increase illnesses and deaths, especially among vulnerable populations, and it can also damage some crops. while increased precipitation can replenish water supplies, which is good and support agriculture, intense storms can damage property. So the intense storm that's bringing all of this water and precipitation in, damaging property, causing loss of life, population displacement, temporarily disrupting essential services such as transportation, telecommunication, energy, and water supplies. However, we can also replenish water supplies. So we see where there's a give and take, a pro and a con, and sometimes it's more cons than pros. So we have high and low temperatures, extreme highs, extreme lows. You have heat waves, heavy precipitation or no precipitation at all. You have river flooding, and tropical cyclone activity, so intense hurricanes, intense tropical storms, all of that. So it's very important to identify extreme weather events and speak about it. So another impact of climate change is rising sea level, which threatens coastal communities and ecosystems. Now, what do you think happens when sea level rises? When sea level rises, there's more potential for flooding, floods riverbanks. If you live on the border of a river, or you live close to a river, or even the beach, you realize that it promotes flooding, especially when there's intense rainfall. So if we go to, let's find a beach that you went to as a child and go to the beach now. If is there a difference in the beach? Usually, what I've realized, based on some beaches that I've went to, is that before when I was young, you could see there's so much sand, and then you actually go into the water for the sea or the ocean or whatever. Now, when I visit back the beach again, you realize that there's the ratio for sand to before you reach the sea. It's crazy. There's actually no beach. There's no sand. There's no beach. There's just water, and that just shows that there's rising sea levels. So using those are things we can see. We can see the impacts of climate change progress over the years by just going to a place that we normally go to and realize that there's such a change. So that's some ways we can observe rising sea levels. Also, if glaciers are melting, of course, you're going to have rising sea levels because that's adding to water content. Now, melting of ice caps, I should say. Now, changes in patterns and amount of rainfall, as well as changes in the timing and amount of stream flow, can affect water supply and water quality and the production of hydroelectricity. Now, remember when I said I love sustainability and sustainable energy, hydroelectricity is, of course, a form of sustainable energy. It is producing electricity through the energy of water, and it's something that's rapidly becoming more and more used. Of course, it's still minority compared to fossil fuels. We know there's a large usage of oil, natural gas, fossil fuels for energy. However, we're seeing some sort of a shift, and over a period of time, we're going to see that the use of fossil fuels kind of degrade because there's more use of sustainable energy. So you have solar energy, hydroelectricity, electricity. There's so much things that we can use for sustainable electricity. So increasing in stream flow, of course, affects the amount of water, the volume of water, which promotes hydroelectricity. The more fast flowing a stream or a river is, the more it helps for hydroelectricity. So we see now how climate change, as mentioned before, can have good and bad effects, mostly bad effects, but there's also some good effects. We spoke about how warmer temperatures enhance the growth of crops. So we see how there are some benefits. However, I'm sorry to say, but the problems really outweigh the benefits. So we also have changing ecosystems, which is something I'm going to touch on. But changing ecosystems influence geographic ranges of many plant and animal species and the timing of their life cycle events, such as migration and reproduction. So let's speak a little bit on changing ecosystems. What does it matter? Changes in the Earth's climate can affect ecosystems by altering the water cycle, habitat, and animal behavior, such as nesting and migration patterns, and the timing of natural processes such as flower blooms. My apologies. So, if the climate is, let's look at it like this: the birds were used to a warm climate, and they knew that at a particular time it would start to get cold, so they would migrate. When the climate is changing, when it usually was cold, maybe it's still warm at that time. You know what I mean? So because of that, it's affecting migrating patterns for birds. Just an example, just to show you how these can affect not just us, but also our animals or plants. Now, changes that disrupts the functioning of ecosystems may increase the risk of harm or even extinction of some species. Some species cannot adapt, and if they can't adapt, they're just going to die. And that's just how biology and natural speciation works. While wildfires occur naturally, more frequent and more intense fires can significantly disrupt ecosystems, damage property, and put people and community at risk and create air pollution problems even far away from the source. All right. So let's take those things into consideration. These are things that we're seeing um, with our own eyes. So we see our wildfires. Of course, these are stuff that wildfires happen naturally. However, climate change makes it more frequent, makes it more intense. And if you're having more frequent and intense wildfires, you're damaging ecosystems for plants and or animal species. And then what's going to happen? They have to adapt to a new environment or they die. So events of change, examples of changing ecosystems, wildfires. You also have stream flow, stream temperatures, lake temperatures, bird wintering ranges, marine species distribution, leaf and bloom dates. All of these stuff are affected. All of these stuff are changing ecosystems. Now, finally, an impact of climate change. Increases in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events such as heat waves, droughts, and floods can increase losses of property, cause cost and disruption to society, and reduce the affordability of insurance. Climate change and we're now at insurance. You see how these things are interlocked and related. Now, the key point here that I'm going to speak about is just society on a whole. We're just going to explore that just for a little bit. So why does society matter? So changes in climate affect the average weather conditions to which we are accustomed. These changes can result in multiple threats to human health and welfare. Let's speak on human health just a little bit. If you are now sick or ill, that's more money on you. You're spending more money for medical fees. You're in the hospital. These are more expenses that you wouldn't have if you weren't ill. So we see now how other things are just now so again, the direct relation is damage to health, but then due to that there is stress on families, there is financial disturbance,